In early 2020, Joe Biden's election campaign was on life support. Biden was seriously struggling to attract much attention or gain momentum. His polling numbers were awful. He struggled in the debates and struggled to win early primaries. Then came South Carolina. Black voters there gave Biden victory in that all-important primary. It also reminded everyone that black voters are the base of the modern Democratic Party. In fact, black voters would continue to show up for Joe Biden the rest of the campaign. In the general election that November, he took more than 90% of the black vote, according to Pew. But a lot can change in 4 years. Recent polling shows black voters are much less interested in Biden and the Democrats. Many of those voters complain that the president has done little to earn their vote. Some say they would even consider voting for Donald J. Trump. And Gaza is also an issue for a lot of them. The Democrats might want to dismiss the ongoing genocide as an issue only for pesky Muslim and Arab voters in Michigan. But as the New York Times reported back in January, 200 black clergy members in Georgia alone signed an open letter calling for a ceasefire. Joining me now to discuss and debate whether Biden is doing enough to keep black voters on board and whether he can win re-election without the same level of black support he had in 2020 are Don Calloway, a former Democratic member of the Missouri House of Representatives and now a Democratic Party strategist, and Pastor Michael McBride, a founder of Black Church PAC and the lead pastor of the Way Church in Berkeley, California. Thank you both for joining me on Mehdi Unfiltered this week. Pastor McBride, let me start with you. You told the New York Times back in January that Gaza is, quote, not a fringe issue, and that there are many of us who feel that this administration has lost its way on Gaza. Is that the view of a lot of black members in your congregation? A few? Some? Like, how big is this in your view?
Well, it's great to be here with you. I would say it's an overwhelming majority of members in certainly my congregation and across the country where we are speaking with folks and meeting with folks. People do believe that the president and this administration, and by extension, the Democratic Party, has lost its way on this issue. We are a people who want to believe in defeating the triplets of evil. Dr. King talked about racism, militarism, and economic exploitation. All three of these triplets of evil are at play in the way in which this administration is supporting Netanyahu and the genocidal campaign of the Israeli government. We believe there has to be a course correction. I don't think it's a fringe. I think it's a mainstream thought process within the black community across the country.
Don, how do you explain the fact that Joe Biden's lead over Donald Trump with black voters has dropped 20 percentage points since 2020?
Yeah, I'm not exactly. First of all, nobody is excited about the Biden administration, but that's okay. Joe Biden is pepperoni pizza at a big-ass family reunion in which everybody couldn't decide on what type of pizza. So the uncle stepped in and said, listen, we're going with pepperoni, and everybody's going to be happy because guess what? Everybody is going to eat. We have to remember that the Democratic Party is the party of the big tent. It always has been, and it always will be. The Republicans on the other side get in line, regardless of whether or not there's a demonic dictator at the helm or whether there's a more country club traditionalist Republican like a Mitt Romney or a W. Bush. So you're always going to have broad dissent within the Democratic Party. I do not fundamentally believe, first of all, I don't believe that Donald Trump is going to win this election. Second of all, I don't believe that black defectors have moved from Biden in numbers that are statistically significant enough to cost Joe Biden the election. Certainly black men have not. And no, talking to Kodak Black and other rappers does not signify substantial.
20 percentage points since 2020 doesn't worry you?
No, because that's over 4 years. That's not one fell swoop, right? And so statistics can be a little fudged there. But I will tell you this, and the pastor is absolutely right. The vast majority of politically active African Americans are deeply concerned about Gaza and Palestine. That is reflective of a 100-year tradition of African American intellectuals rooting for and encouraging and advocating for a free and liberated Palestine. However, black voters do not have and have never had the luxury of being single-issue voters. So do we care about Palestine? Absolutely. But do we vote for Palestine? Do we vote against Joe Biden in the interest of Palestine? Against reproductive freedom? Probably not. Do we do that against our own voting rights and, frankly, against the ideas of democracy? Probably not. But we are absolutely right for the uncommitted votes we've cast all thus far in this primary. We're absolutely right. The pastor's absolutely right that we deeply care about the issue, but I don't think it cost Joe Biden the election in the general.
Pastor, do you agree with Don there that, look, people care about Gaza, but black people can't afford to be single-issue voters and are not single-issue voters?
Well, I think it's accurate to say that we're not single-issue voters. I think it is always the height of optimism with my Democratic operative friends who love to say that there's nothing to worry about. The margins of victory in this last election cycle are the margins of folks who may stay home. The idea that there's nothing to worry about, I think, is the same wishful thinking that folks thought when Hillary Clinton was running against Donald Trump in 2016. And we ended up with a terrible president that we must defeat in this Republican nomination side. None of us want Donald Trump. Donald Trump is an existential threat to this country. But I will say that many of the young people, many of the Black men that we're speaking to, I don't hear them saying they're going to vote for Donald Trump. I should hear them saying they're not going to vote at all.
So on that note, Don, it isn't just about voter intention, whether it's Biden or Trump. It's about voter turnout. We're seeing polls suggesting that a lot of Black voters saying they just won't show up in November. A, does that worry you? And B, what's driving that?
It absolutely worries me that people are saying this, but let's be clear about something. The summer just started last week with the Memorial Day holiday. You, myself, and Pastor, and a few other folks who are intellectually engaged and politically committed are paying attention. The rest of the world is still watching Dancing with the Stars. They'll start paying attention around September, October. That is simply what the American political behavior shows us. Now, Pastor, I got to say, I'm looking forward to coming and seeing you out at the Way in Berkeley, and I know that you are intentional with your didactic and a man of explicit language. I never said there was nothing to worry about. What I specifically said is that we're not one-issue voters and that Joe Biden is going to win. There's a lot to worry about. How do you manage this broad coalition that I talked about? How do you make sure that folks who've turned 18 since the last election do the right thing and vote for Joe Biden as opposed to voting for some other form of non-democracy? I never said there was nothing to worry about. There's a lot to worry about.
On that note about voters who've turned 18, Pastor, is this a generational issue where young Black voters are more angry with Biden than older Black voters?
Well, I think it's important to appreciate that what this administration has done with younger voters is criminalize protests on campuses, which now make them feel as if we are being asked to support an administration who clearly came out against our constitutional right to protest, to lift up our voice, many of which in a nonviolent manner. And so part of what I think is a worry, right, is that too many folks downplay the kind of angst and the kind of disenchantment that is attached to not just this single issue of Gaza, but to the ways in which police brutality and police murders are still at an all-time high. The economy in many of our communities are still causing so much economic desperation while we are sending hundreds of billions of dollars to other countries to fight wars. So it's important, I think, for us to appreciate why we may not be single issue voters, the generational consciousness around the interconnectedness of these issues is what's going to cause, I believe, a voter depression if we don't get out early, which is like yesterday, helping people make the connections to see that Trump is the existential threat and we vote for ourselves, not for a candidate.
Let me ask you this, Pastor. Don is implying, and Don can correct me, I don't want to put words in his mouth, that we're in the summer. It's just started. People aren't paying much attention. And the implication, as I understand Don says, once people do start paying attention, the race won't look like it looks now. There is an argument from the Democratic Party itself, Pastor, that, and I've heard this from Democratic operatives, DNC folks, that look, when the choice is Trump v. Biden, the Black people, the Latinos, the Muslims even will come home to Joe Biden. Do you believe that?
I believe that the overwhelming majority of the big party tent will vote for Biden. But the question I always have is, will it be enough? It is the same passion gap that I'm worried about. That is a result of us not having the runway necessary to activate voters. We can't wait till the summer to activate voters if they're disenchanted. We need months, a buildup. And this Gaza war and many other issues have literally created a paralysis among the activist base of our communities that are assigned to helping to activate the voters in November. So yes, it's only the summer, but I believe it is a summer that is too late in coming. We need to ramp up our work now, not later.
Will it be enough, Don, to go back to those margins? You look at the uncommitted vote, which has pulled off over 100,000 in Michigan, big margins in Minnesota. These are states that Joe Biden won very narrowly in 2020, that Hillary Clinton lost very narrowly in 2016. When you look at those uncommitted numbers in Wisconsin, in Michigan, in Georgia, what do you make of that?
A couple of basic truths that you get after 20 years of running in and participating in campaigns. Number one, there is a cadence and a machination and a process to how campaigns are run, coordinated, national, local, state. You don't see the results of that until September, October, and often even into November. So you don't see the fruits of that labor. By the way, the labor is happening now by people who are politically engaged and has been happening over the course of the entire Biden administration. That labor, those fruits do not expose themselves until the fall. So that's why we'll see, and that's when we'll see polling that is more favorable for Biden. So no, I'm not too worried about those uncommitted numbers, although I do think they made very, very strong statements in the respective primaries. The second thing is that the reality is no Democrat will ever win a presidential election by a significant margin ever again in our lifetimes. That is simply the nature of the two-party system that we exist in. Joe Biden will win. He will not win by 4 points, perhaps 3 points, if Trump derangement syndrome is at an all-time metastatic high. The only Democrat who will ever be elected president again will be so by 3 points. So it will always take all of us organizing plus extraordinary turnout, and we will have this exercise of existential panic every 4 years, and perhaps that's a good thing in the face of a Trump candidacy.
You mentioned a Trump candidacy, Don. I got to ask this question. Is it not astonishing to see Donald Trump openly embracing white grievance, white supremacy, continuing to empower, embolden, praise open racists, say stuff like, black people like me because I got indicted, and his numbers with black voters go up, not down?
His numbers with black voters have not gone up to a statistically significant margin. That's simply not the case.
But the fact that they're even going up, shouldn't they be at an all-time low? Explain to our viewers why he's not in the tank with black voters when he's at an all-time racist high. I don't know the answer.
Donald Trump is not in the tank with, first of all, he is in the tank with black voters. Let's be very clear
not
about
compared to 2020.
It's not.
Or 2016.
Listen, black men have not defected from Joe Biden to a statistically significant amount such that, forget about whether or not Joe Biden's going to win. Black voters have not jumped to Donald Trump. We simply have, that is not an accurate representation of what's happening in the black male verse.
Joe Biden still commands the vast majority of black, Latino, Arab American, all that support.
So 93% of black women, you would agree.
But Trump's numbers are going up with black voters, unless we say all the polls are.
Statistically significant degree.
Any appeal to Donald Trump is because they have a massive misinformation, disinformation campaign that is paired with discontent in the black community. And we must not try to just cover up the discontent as if there is not at least a undercurrent of folks feeling like the government is not working for them. Jesse Jackson said it like this: the greatest number of voters in this country are non-voters. These votes are always up for grabs, and we must fight for these votes with truth, but with also a certain agenda that animates the voters and not prioritize candidates and parties over the people.
There's no doubt that the couch is absolutely on the ballot, but let's be clear about something. Michael Jordan has 6 rings. Black women are the Michael Jordan of American democracy. They vote at 93 to 94% for the Democratic Party every time. Well, black men are at 90 to 91% every single time, and that statistically has not shifted not only to Donald Trump, but away from the Democrats. You are seeing uncommitted. You are seeing the couch as a significant opponent here, but black men have not defected such that democracy is in jeopardy.
Pastor McBride, let me ask you this before we run out of time. People are struggling when it comes to Gaza, as we started the conversation, as to how they're going to vote in November. They don't like Donald Trump, but they don't want to reward a president they believe has been complicit in genocide. What do you say to people who ask you, what do I do? The choice is a horrible choice. And do you struggle with that choice?
Well, I have a moral dissonance around the issue of Gaza and this president and our administration and our tax dollars going to hurt, harm, and bomb innocent civilians. We're actually launching today a Defeat by Truth campaign to make Donald Trump's defeat the North Star for how we engage voters who are having such a moral dissonance. And so I believe we must acknowledge that if we have to have a political opponent on issues we care about, we would rather have that person be Joe Biden and not Donald Trump. So we're going to keep pushing Biden, the Democrats in this administration, to do right, morally, righteously on the issues we care about, but we must defeat Donald Trump. He is a madman, he is an authoritarian, and he does not deserve another administration to further run this country even more into the ground than it was when he got in office.
Don, last word to you. If Joe Biden rang you tonight and said, Don, how do I make sure black voters turn out for me like they turned out in 2020? What would you say to him?
Do the same thing you did in 2020, which is describe the entire holistic universe of the stakes. And Gaza is an extraordinary, importantly part of that. And yes, you need to take further action to enforce a ceasefire. Yes, we need to stop weapons shipping. Perhaps that's the most dramatic thing you can do to protect the segment of black voters who are going away. Yes, we need further action on student loans. But Gaza is absolutely top of mind to a younger, more progressive black voter, and he still has room to take action on that. That said, he still has to lay out the entire menu of issues that affect not only black people, but all of Americans.
Don Calloway, Pastor Michael McBride, appreciate you both taking part in this discussion. That's our show. Mehdi Unfiltered will be back next week. In the meantime, make sure you subscribe to Zeteo. For now, from me, goodbye.